No alarms sounded when the galaxy changed. That was what frightened them most. Inside the great chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from hundreds of species argued, as they always had. The room was vast, shaped like a hollow sphere, floating above a blue artificial star. Light flowed across crystal walls. Gravity stayed perfectly balanced. Everything was controlled. Everything was safe. So they believed. The council was in session to discuss minor border conflicts, small wars, trade disputes, the usual noise of power. Ancient empires spoke with confidence. Young civilizations listened in fear. Humanity was not on the agenda. Humanity had not been on the agenda for centuries. To most of the council, humans were a footnote, a weak species from a yellow star system. Too emotional, too divided, too fragile. They had lost territory, lost influence, and slowly faded from galactic memory. Some believed humans were extinct. Others simply did not care. Then, without warning, the artificial star at the center of the chamber flickered. For half a second, the light dimmed. Conversation slowed. A second later, the star returned to normal brightness. Council members laughed nervously. A minor power fluctuation, they assumed. Nothing more. But the sensor masters were already panicking. Across the chamber, data streams began to stutter. Star maps froze. Long-range scanners showed impossible readings. Mass where there should be none, shadows where space should be empty. Then came the silence. Entire sections of the outer galaxy went dark. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone from observation. Stars still existed, but no signal escaped them. No light, no radiation, no gravity waves. It was as if something had wrapped a hand around space itself and closed its fist. The council chamber finally went quiet. An elder from one of the oldest empires stood and demanded an explanation. Their species had ruled star systems before most others invented language. Nothing like this had ever happened. Technicians tried to recalibrate sensors. They failed. Military observers checked their fleets. Several border armadas had stopped responding. No distress calls. No battle data. No debris fields. Just absence. Fear crept into the chamber, slow and heavy. Then every display screen in the council activated at once. Not with an alert. Not with a threat. With a single line of text. The language shifted automatically, translating itself perfectly for every species present. Human expeditionary fleet has arrived. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Confusion exploded instantly. Voices overlapped. Demands were shouted. Humanity? That name had not been spoken in power halls for generations. A council historian began searching archives in panic. Records appeared, old, incomplete, dismissed. Humans were explorers, scientists, merchants, not conquerors. They had no great fleets, no empire, no reason to frighten anyone. And yet, the message remained. Military leaders demanded visual confirmation. If humans had ships, they wanted to see them. The sensor masters tried. They found nothing. No heat signatures, no engine trails, no mass readings that made sense. But the dark region of space continued to grow. Stars vanished from scans one by one, like candles being covered rather than blown out. A younger council member whispered a question no one wanted to answer. If they are here, where are they? As if in response, the gravity inside the chamber shifted. Just slightly. Enough for everyone to feel it. Not a malfunction. Not an accident. A demonstration. The artificial star at the center of the chamber bent, its light curving inward for a brief moment, as though something unseen had passed between it and reality. Panic finally broke discipline. Several council members ordered weapons to be armed. Defensive fleets began mobilizing across the galaxy. Emergency protocols were activated. Then a second message appeared. This one was longer. This one carried a voice. Calm. Humans. Measured. We know you cannot see us, the voice said. That is intentional. The chamber shook as ancient leaders listened in stunned silence. We were quiet for a long time. The voice continued. You thought we were gone. You thought we were weak. A pause. That misunderstanding ends today. No threat followed. No demand. Just the sound of controlled breathing and the sense that something vast and patient was watching them all from the dark. The message ended. The screens went black. The galaxy held its breath. And for the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council realized a terrifying truth. Humanity had not returned to be heard. They had returned because they no longer needed permission. The Galactic Council did not adjourn. They could not. Fear had frozen the chamber more effectively than any command. The artificial star at the center burned steadily again, but no one trusted it. No one trusted anything anymore. The word humanity echoed through hundreds of minds, bringing confusion instead of clarity. An emergency archival command spread across the chamber. Thousands of data spirits awakened at once, digging through layers of forgotten history. Records that had not been opened in centuries began to surface. At first, the results were disappointing. Humans were exactly as remembered. A young species. Short-lived. Emotion-driven. Their early expansion was fast but careless. They fought among themselves more than with others. When they first joined the galactic stage, they brought curiosity, not fear. They traded knowledge. They asked questions. Too many questions. Their technology had been clever, but never overwhelming. Their ships relied on conventional matter, fragile hulls, inefficient engines. When stronger empires pushed outward, humanity retreated. When borders tightened, humans compromised. System by system, they gave ground. Council records described them as adaptable but non-threatening. Useful allies. Poor enemies. Then the record stopped. No great defeat. No final war. No extinction notice. Humanity simply faded. The assumption had been simple. Humans had collapsed inward, lost their colonies, broken apart, eventually erased by time, like many others before them. The council had moved on. Now that assumption was unraveling. A sharp voice broke the silence. A military observer from a warrior empire slammed a clawed limb against the floor. This is deception. Humans could not do this. No species hides fleets on this scale. No technology bends gravity without detection. Several others agreed. Panic often needed denial to survive. But the sensor masters did not. They worked in silence, fear written into every movement. They ran simulations, cross-checked impossible readings, and rewrote physical constants again and again. The result was always the same. Something massive existed inside the darkened region of space. Not one ship, not a fleet. An entire structure of movement, layered and coordinated, drifting through the void as if space itself carried them. And it was growing closer. Another archivist spoke, voice trembling. There are sealed files. That drew attention. Sealed files were rare. Only events deemed too dangerous to remember were hidden so deeply. The council authorized immediate access. The first file opened slowly, as if resisting. It was labeled Project Umbra Initiative Species, Human Status, Abandoned, per Council Consensus. The room chilled. The record dated back to the era when humanity was still active in galactic politics. It detailed joint research proposals submitted by humans to multiple empires. The subject, dark matter. At the time, dark matter was considered an annoyance. A background problem. It made calculations messy and theories unstable. No empire had found practical use for it. Humans disagreed. They believed dark matter was not passive, that it interacted with gravity in ways no one had yet understood, that it could be shaped, contained, even fed. The council had rejected the proposals. The reasons were clear in the notes. Too dangerous. Too theoretical. Too unstable. One note stood out, written by a senior council scientist long since dead. Humans approach the unknown without fear. This is admirable and alarming. The Umbra Initiative had been denied funding, denied access to shared research zones, and quietly classified. Humanity had been warned to stop. They had not. The next file showed economic pressure, trade restrictions, subtle sanctions. Nothing official, nothing that looked like punishment. But it was enough. Human colonies near dark matter. Rich regions were cut off from support. Supply routes slowed. Access to shared infrastructure vanished. The humans protested. Then they adapted. A new file opened. It was not council-authored. It was human. A private transmission, recovered from an abandoned relay station at the edge of known space. The voice was calm, tired, and unmistakably human. They are afraid, the voice said. Not of us. Of what we are trying to touch. So we will go where they cannot follow. Coordinates followed. Deep space. Outside trade lanes. Near gravitational anomalies most species avoided. The archivist stopped reading. The implication was clear. Humanity had not disappeared by accident. They had left. A senior council member whispered, "How did we not notice?" The answer arrived immediately. Another alert flashed across the chamber. A border world, an old military outpost belonging to one of the strongest empires, had gone silent. Again, no explosion, no warning, no escape pods. Just gone. This time, however, there was data. For less than 1 second before signal loss, sensors recorded a distortion passing through the system. Not a ship, not a weapon. A moving shadow where gravity folded inward, dragging light behind it like a wake. The sensor master replayed the data. Several council members turned away. This was not destruction. This was removed. The warrior empire that had mocked the human threat earlier now demanded immediate retaliation. Fleets were ordered to advance toward the dark region. The council hesitated. Then something unexpected happened. The advancing fleet slowed. Not because of resistance, because their engines began to fail. One by one, ships reported increasing mass. Fuel consumption spiked. Time dilation warnings flooded their systems. Crews aged minutes and seconds. Seconds and heartbeats. The fleets had not been attacked. They had flown too close to something that changed how reality behaved. The ships turned back in panic. Only half made it. The rest were left drifting, trapped in warped space where rescue was impossible. The chamber descended into chaos. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded war. Some demanded answers. And as if summoned by the collective fear, the human voice returned. This time, it did not come from the screens. It came from everywhere. "We see your archives," the voice said. "You are remembering us now." The council demanded to know what the humans wanted. The reply was immediate. "Understanding," the voice said. "You forgot what desperation can teach." A pause. "You believed power was loud. That dominance required borders, flags, and fleets." The dark region of space shifted again. Closer now. Large enough that even unaided vision could sense the absence beyond the chamber walls. We learned something else. The gravity in the chamber stabilized, perfectly balanced once more. "Silence," the voice said, "is stronger." The transmission ended. No threats, no demands, just certainty. As the council struggled to regain control, a final archival file unlocked on its own. No author, no classification, only a single line of text, written in old human code. "When you notice US again, IT will already be too late to stop US." The chamber remained silent long after, because every species present now understood the same terrible truth. Humanity had not evolved into warriors. They had evolved into something that no longer needed war at all. The first human warship did not arrive. It emerged. Across the galaxy, every species that still had functioning deep space sensors witnessed the same impossible event. In the darkened region where stars no longer spoke, something shifted, not forward, not backward, but through. Space bent inward like fabric pulled by unseen hands. Light curved. Distance lost meaning. And then the shadow unfolded. It had no clear shape, no edges, no surface that reflected light. It was enormous, yet seemed to shrink when observed directly, as if reality itself refused to describe it properly. The sensors tried to name it. They failed. Mass readings contradicted each other. One moment, the object weighed more than a moon. The next, less than a grain of dust. Gravity spiked, then vanished. Time jittered around it like a wounded animal. The council chamber erupted. Military leaders shouted orders. Scientists screamed warnings. Religious representatives fell silent, staring in awe or terror. The object did not attack. It did not move aggressively. It simply existed. Then another shadow appeared. Then another. Not side by side, but layered. One within the gravity well of another. A formation that did not follow three-dimensional logic. The realization hit slowly, and then all at once. This was not a fleet approaching from a distance. This was a fleet that had been here the entire time. Hidden not by stealth, but by physics no one else understood. A senior sensor master spoke, voice barely steady. "These vessels are not traveling through space as we define it. They are anchored to something else." "What something?" demanded a council marshal. The sensor master swallowed. "Dark matter." The word spread like poison. Dark matter was everywhere, yet untouchable. Invisible scaffolding holding galaxies together. No species had ever controlled it. Most had stopped trying. Humans had not. The shadows shifted again, slowly rotating around the council's artificial star. Not threatening, not defensive, observing. Then one shadow extended. Not a weapon. A projection. A three-dimensional image formed in the center of the chamber. Not holographic. Not light-based. It appeared carved directly out of empty space. It showed a star system. The council recognized it instantly. A heavily fortified system belonging to one of the oldest empires. Layers of defense platforms. Planetary shields. Fleets stationed at every orbital angle. The image zoomed in. A human voice spoke, calm and precise. This system was chosen because it represents certainty to you. The image paused. Then the star at the center of the system dimmed. Not exploded. Not destabilized. It dimmed as if someone had gently lowered a cosmic dial. Planetary shields failed instantly. Fleets lost power. Sensors screamed nonsense. The star did not die. It was contained, wrapped in a lattice of darkness that drank its gravity and fed on its fusion. This, the voice said, is not destruction. The image froze. It is restraint. The lattice dissolved. The star returned to normal. Power surged back into ships and platforms. No permanent damage. No casualties. But every defense system in the system had been rendered useless for 47 seconds. 47 seconds was an eternity in warfare. The message was clear. Humanity could end civilizations. Or spare them. At will. A warrior representative roared in fury and ordered an immediate counterstrike. A nearby rapid response fleet fired long-range weapons toward the nearest shadow. The weapons never reached their target. They slowed. Then slowed more. Then stopped entirely, suspended in space as if frozen in time. The shadow absorbed them. Not exploded. Not deflected. Absorbed. The weapons ceased to exist. The shadow did not react further. It did not retaliate. The human voice returned, colder now. We did not come to trade threats. A pause. We came to correct an error. The projection changed. It now shows human history. Cities burning. Colonies collapsing. Refugee fleets fleeing through broken jump gates. Entire human worlds abandoned because no one would help stabilize the space around them. You labeled us weak, the voice said. You believed we vanished because we could not compete. The image shifted again. Hidden stations near black holes. Human habitats anchored inside radiation storms. Shipyards built where gravity crushed unshielded hulls. You were wrong. The shadows around the council chamber began to move. Not closer, not farther, but through each other. Overlapping. Interlocking. The sensor masters cried out as their instruments overloaded. These vessels are not individual ships, one shouted. They are segments of a distributed structure. Each one is incomplete alone. Understanding struck like lightning. The human fleet was not made of ships. It was made of pieces of a single machine, spread across space, using dark matter as connective tissue. A weaponized infrastructure on a galactic scale. The human voice continued. We learned early that building bigger ships was pointless. Bigger targets still die. The projection showed a human ship from centuries past, shattered in battle. So we stopped building targets. The image dissolved. Now the council saw nothing but the shadows themselves, faintly visible against the chamber's walls. We built an absence, the voice said. We built places where enemy weapons could not reach because they could not exist. One council member whispered, barely audible, "Why show us this?" The answer came immediately. Because you are deciding whether to repeat an old mistake. The shadows shifted again. One of them peeled away from the formation and drifted toward the outer edge of the darkened region of space. Far away, a pirate empire, long ignored by the council, was in the middle of a raid. Their fleets were mid-attack, tearing apart civilian transports. They never saw it coming. The shadow passed through their system like a tide. Every ship lost power simultaneously. Hulls did not rupture. Crews did not die, but their engines never restarted. Their weapons never reactivated. Their fleets were left drifting forever, helpless, alive, and forgotten. The shadow moved on. The human voice spoke softly now. We do not kill unless necessary. A pause. But we always finish what we begin. The shadow returned to the formation. Silence crushed the council chamber. No one argued anymore. No one threatened. They had all seen the truth. Humanity had not built a fleet to win wars. They had built a system that made war irrelevant. A council elder finally spoke, voice hollow. What do you want from us? The shadows stopped moving. The darkness stabilized. The answer came, simple and terrifying. Recognition, the human voice said. And a choice. The chamber waited. Accept that the era of unchecked expansion is over, the voice continued. Or force us to enforce that truth. The shadows began to withdraw, fading back into the dark matter sea that hid them so completely. But before they vanished, the human voice delivered one final line. We were invisible because you never looked for us. A pause. Now that you see us, decide carefully. The darkness closed. The stars did not return, and the galaxy understood that something fundamental had changed. The shadows withdrew, but their absence was heavier than their presence. Across the Galactic Council chamber, no one spoke. No one moved. The artificial star burned steadily, yet every representative felt as if the light no longer reached them the same way. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been measured and found vulnerable. At last, the council demanded what they should have asked long ago. They demanded to know how. The human voice did not answer immediately. When it finally returned, it did not speak of weapons. It spoke of cost. We did not wake one day with this power, the voice said. We paid for it slowly, quietly, in ways you never recorded. The darkness beyond the chamber shifted, and once again space itself became a canvas. The projection that formed was not a threat display. It was not tactical. It was a human memory. The image showed an early human colony at the edge of known space. A fragile world, barely terraformed, its skies thin and unstable. Children ran across metal walkways under artificial suns. Hope still existed then. Then the projection accelerated. Trade routes vanished. Supplies stopped arriving. Council-sanctioned shipping lanes rerouted away for efficiency. Repair stations closed. Communications delays stretched from days to years. The colony did not fall in a single disaster. It was starving. Humans dismantled their own cities to survive. Ships were taken apart for raw materials. Families entered cryosleep not to travel, but to wait, hoping rescue would come. It never did. The projection cut to another world. This one is closer to a black hole. A human research station clung to reality as gravity twisted space around it. Alarms screamed constantly. Radiation storms tore its shields. Other species would have fled. Humans stayed. They learned to calculate inside chaos. They learned how time bent near massive gravity. They learned how dark matter flowed like a current beneath reality. And they lost people. Hundreds at first, then thousands. Entire teams vanished during failed containment tests. Stations imploded when calculations were off by fractions too small for any other species to notice. The council watched in silence as the projection showed human memorials carved into bare metal walls. No grand monuments. Just names. Thousands of names. The human voice did not tremble. We were fragile, it said. So we stopped pretending we were not. The projection shifted again. This time, it showed human fleets, not warships, but evacuation vessels. Long lines of them fleeing collapsing systems, passing through unstable jump corridors no one else dared to use. Many never arrived. Those that did carried survivors hardened by loss. These were the generations you never saw. The voice continued. Because they lived where your sensors could not function. The image zoomed out. The council saw what looked like scattered debris fields near gravitational anomalies. Regions long dismissed as uninhabitable. The debris moved. Stations unfolded. Habitats rotated into alignment. Shipyards emerged from shadows, built directly into regions of warped space where normal physics failed. Humanity had hidden not by stealth, but by choosing places no one else could exist. A council scientist whispered, "You built civilization inside failure zones." "Yes," the human voice replied. "Because safety made us weak. Danger taught us precision." The projection changed again. This time, it showed internal human conflict. Debates. Riots. Entire factions arguing whether survival was worth the cost. Whether the research was ethical. Whether dark matter should be touched at all. Some humans walked away. Many stayed. The projection lingered for a single moment. A test chamber. Dark matter containment is unstable. Evacuation alarms are active. A human engineer remained behind, manually adjusting gravity regulators while others fled. The countdown reached 0. The chamber collapsed inward. The dark matter stabilized. The engineer did not survive. The projection froze. "We did not master dark matter by being fearless," the voice said. "We mastered it by deciding what we were willing to lose." The council felt something shift then. This was not arrogance. This was grief refined into control. The projection faded, replaced by a simple star map. Human expansion routes appeared, but not outward. Inward, downward, into deeper gravitational wells, toward invisible structures that held galaxies together. While you competed for territory, the voice continued. We competed with reality. A council elder spoke at last. You could have asked for help. The reply was immediate. We did, the human voice said. You told us to stop. Silence followed. The projection returned one final time. It showed the human fleet, not as shadows, not as weapons, but as a vast network of nodes. Each dark matter warship was a stabilizer, a processor, a guardian. They were not built to conquer planets. They were built to hold space together. When we learned how fragile the universe truly is, the voice said, we realized something. The image zoomed out until the council saw spiral galaxies, filaments of dark matter connecting them like veins. If reckless expansion continued, the voice went on, the damage would cascade. Collapsing stars, tearing gravitational structures apart, ending civilizations that never fired a weapon. The human fleet pulsed faintly. So we made a decision you never wanted to make. The council understood before the words arrived. Humanity had taken responsibility, not for ruling the galaxy, for preventing it from destroying itself. We did not return for revenge, the voice said. We returned because the system you built was unstable. The darkness around the chamber eased slightly, not retreating, but settling, like a watchful presence. You will call us monsters, the voice continued. You will call us tyrants hiding behind silence. A pause. We accept that. Another pause. But we will not allow the galaxy to burn because you were afraid to change. The projection faded completely. No shadows moved. No weapons activated. The council sat with the truth. Humanity had not risen through conquest. They had risen because no one else was willing to pay the price of restraint. At last, a single question echoed through the chamber, spoken by many minds at once. What happens now? The human voice answered, softer than before. Now, it said, you decide whether this cost was necessary. The stars beyond the chamber remained dimmed, wrapped gently in darkness that no longer felt hostile, but final. And for the first time, the Galactic Council realized the most terrifying part of all. Humanity was not angry. Humanity was tired. And tired guardians were far more dangerous than furious enemies. The Galactic Council believed they still had time. That belief was their final mistake. After the human revelation, emergency sessions stretched for cycles without rest. Delegates rotated out, replaced by others just as afraid. The chamber stayed lit at all hours. Data flowed endlessly. Arguments circled the same questions again and again. Could humanity be trusted? Was this power temporary? Could it be copied? Could it be destroyed? Most of all, could it be controlled? The human presence did not interfere. The shadows remained distant, holding the darkened regions of space in perfect silence. Trade lanes closer to the core remained untouched. Civilian worlds were unharmed. To many council members, this restraint looked like weakness. That idea spread quietly. Behind sealed channels and private war rooms, the strongest empires met without the council's consent. They shared intelligence. They compared losses. They reassured one another that no species, no matter how advanced, could stand alone against the combined might of the galaxy. They convinced themselves humanity was bluffing. After all, humans had shown mercy. They had warned instead of conquered. They had demonstrated control instead of annihilation. To empires raised on domination, that made no sense. One empire took the lead. An ancient power, older than the council itself. Their fleets had ended civilizations long before humans invented writing. Their scientists had uncovered relic weapons from extinct precursor species, devices built not to win wars, but to end eras. One such weapon had been hidden for millennia. A contingency. A last answer. The Empire activated it in secret. The weapon was not aimed at the human fleet. It was aimed at the galaxy itself. Deep in interstellar space, far from inhabited systems, a structure unfolded, vast, angular, and screaming with energy no sensor could fully process. It fed on vacuum energy, on subspace tension, on the strain created by centuries of uncontrolled expansion. The goal was simple: trigger a cascading gravitational rupture. collapsed the dark matter filaments humanity depended on. If the humans had tied their fleet to the invisible skeleton of the universe, then breaking that skeleton would kill them, along with everything else. The weapon fired. Across the galaxy, alarms screamed. Stars wobbled in their orbits. Jump lanes destabilized. Ancient black holes flared like wounded beasts. The darkened regions humanity controlled began to shudder. The council chamber descended into panic. Sensor masters shouted impossible readings. Time dilation spikes appeared everywhere at once. Even the artificial star flickered wildly, its containment field strained to failure. A council elder screamed for the humans to respond. For the first time since their return, there was no answer. The shadows did not move. For several heartbeats, it seemed the galaxy itself was tearing apart. Then space tightened. The shuddering stopped, not gradually, but instantly, like a hand clamping shut around a wound. Darkness surged outward from the human-controlled regions, racing toward the source of the attack faster than light, faster than causality should allow. The shadows reappeared. All of them. Not layered. Not dispersed. Unified. The human fleet did not intercept the weapon. It wrapped around the damage. Dark matter flowed like liquid night, sealing fractures in space-time, reinforcing filaments that had begun to snap. Gravity stabilized. Jump lanes locked into new, stronger configurations. The galaxy screamed and survived. Only then did the fleet turn toward the source. The ancient empire's weapons did not explode. It did not resist. It was unmade, not destroyed, unwritten. Sensors showed the structure thinning, fading, losing definition. Energy bled away into nothing. Then the space it occupied smoothed out, as if the weapon had never been there at all. Moments later, something worse happened. Every archive across the galaxy updated. Records of the weapon vanished. Schematics erased. Historical references gone. Even the memories of those who built it became uncertain, fragmented, unreliable. The empire that had fired it screamed accusations. The human voice finally returned. It was not calm. It was not angry. I was exhausted. We warned you, the voice said. The council demanded to know what humanity had done. The reply came with devastating clarity. You attempted to collapse the structure that holds the galaxy together, the voice said. We prevented that. A pause. Then we removed the knowledge that made it possible. The empire raged, declaring war, calling humanity tyrants and monsters. Fleets were mobilized. Emergency alliances were invoked. None of it mattered, because the consequence was already unfolding. Across the ancient empire's territory, their ships began to fail. Not catastrophically, not violently. Their jump drives refused to align. Their weapons lost coherence. Their shields flickered, then stabilized at minimal strength. They were not disarmed. They were limited. The human voice spoke again. You will not be punished for fear, it said. You will be restrained for recklessness. The council realized then what humanity had done. They had not crippled the empire. They had rewritten the rules that the empire depended on. Its fleets could still defend their worlds, but they would never again project power beyond them. A murmur spread through the chamber. Small civilizations, those long bullied, taxed, erased, or enslaved, began to understand. This was not conquest. This was containment. The human voice addressed the council directly. This was your test, it said. You failed. The darkness around the chamber did not threaten. It waited. We offered you a choice, the voice continued. Change willingly, or be changed by force. A pause. You chose force. Silence followed. No one argued now. No one demanded retaliation, because everyone understood the truth. Humanity had just saved the galaxy from annihilation, and punished only the ones responsible. A council representative from a minor species, one barely noticed before, spoke quietly. What happens to the rest of us? The answer came immediately. You continue, the human voice said. Safely. The shadows began to recede again, spreading out, re-establishing their quiet watch over critical regions of space. But understand this, the voice added. There will not be another warning. The ancient empire fell silent. Their fleets powered down. Their pride shattered more completely than any battle could have done. As the emergency faded and stability returned, the council was left with an unbearable realization. Humanity had not only won, they had proven something far more terrifying. That even at the edge of total destruction, they chose preservation. And that meant they were now the final authority on what the galaxy was allowed to risk. The galaxy did not celebrate its survival. It exhaled. Across thousands of worlds, emergency alarms powered down. Jump lanes stabilized into new patterns that navigators would spend lifetimes relearning. Ancient stars settled back into predictable orbits. The invisible scaffolding of dark matter, once strained to the edge of collapse, held firm again. Peace returned. But it was not the peace the galaxy remembered. On the Council's capital world, the Great Chamber finally dimmed its artificial star to a softer glow. Delegates sat in silence, exhaustion etched into forms both organic and synthetic. The ancient empire that had triggered the catastrophe remained connected to the session, but their representatives no longer spoke. They listened. So did everyone else. Because now comes the hardest part: understanding what humanity's victory actually meant. Reports flooded in from every corner of known space. Some were expected. Others were deeply unsettling. Pirate activity collapsed almost overnight. Fleets that had terrorized trade routes for centuries found their engines unreliable beyond certain regions. Slavers discovered that hyperspace corridors they depended on simply refused to open. No explosions. No human patrols. No visible enforcement. Just limits. At the same time, small civilizations reported something unprecedented. Relief. Border pressure vanished. Tribute demands stopped. Expansion fleets from dominant empires turned back, citing navigation instability or unacceptable risk profiles. For the first time in recorded history, weaker species were not being hunted by the ambitions of stronger ones. They were being ignored, and that frightened the powerful far more than open war ever had. Inside the council chamber, a senior delegate finally broke the silence. "You have altered the balance," they said to the darkness beyond the walls. "Yes," the human voice replied. "You have made entire doctrines obsolete. Yes, you have made our fleets irrelevant." A pause. "Only where they were misused," the voice answered. That distinction cut deep, because it forced the council to confront a truth they had avoided for millennia. The galaxy had never been ruled by law. It had been ruled by reach. Who could project force farthest? Who could punish fastest? Who could erase consequences before they formed? Humanity had not taken that power. They had removed it. A military representative demanded clarity. "Are you disarming the galaxy?" "No," the human voice said. "We are defining boundaries." The shadows shifted subtly, not as a threat, but as emphasis. Defense is preserved. Exploration is preserved. Cooperation is preserved. The voice continued. Unrestrained domination is not. The council realized then that humanity had not installed a new ruler. They had installed rules that could not be ignored, and no one had voted for them. Anger simmered beneath the fear. "You had no mandate," one delegate accused. "No authority to decide this." The human reply was quiet. "Neither did gravity." The chamber stilled. "Neither did entropy," the voice went on. "Neither did time. Yet all of them shape your lives more completely than any council ever has." A pause. "We did not seek authority," the voice said. "We accepted responsibility when no one else would." The ancient empire finally spoke again, their voices hollow. "You have made us prisoners in our own territory." "No," the human voice corrected. "You are prisoners of your own history. We simply removed your ability to repeat it." That truth spread like a wound reopening. Across the galaxy, power structures began to crack, not violently, but internally. War economies collapsed as contracts vanished. Weapon manufacturers found their products unsellable beyond planetary defense. Military academies struggled to justify doctrines built on projection and conquest. Meanwhile, something else began to grow. Diplomacy. Not the kind enforced by threat, but the kind born of necessity. Trade routes rerouted through stable corridors humanity had quietly reinforced. Cooperative research initiatives emerged around dark matter stabilization, cautiously shared under human oversight. For the first time, empires had to ask instead of demand. Some refused. They isolated themselves, retreating inward, clinging to pride and resentment. Humanity did not interfere. Isolation, they understood, was punishment enough. Others adapted. Former rivals opened channels long considered unthinkable. Border worlds became meeting grounds instead of battlegrounds. Shared defense treaties replaced expansion pacts. The council itself began to change. Sessions grew quieter, shorter. Decisions focused less on territory and more on sustainability, logistics, and long-term survival. Not because humanity demanded it, because ignoring those concerns now carried consequences no fleet could fix. Still, fear lingered. A council philosopher posed the question many were thinking. What if you are wrong? They asked the darkness. What if your restraint becomes stagnant? What if the galaxy needs conflict to evolve? The human voice did not answer immediately. When it did, it carried something new. Memory. Humanity asked itself the same question, the voice said. For centuries, the shadows shifted and a brief projection appeared. Human cities rebuilding after ancient wars, art blooming in the aftermath of devastation, science surging forward after catastrophe. We believed suffering forged progress, the voice continued. We were wrong. The projection changed again. This time, it showed quiet moments. Collaboration. Incremental discoveries. Lives lived without fear of sudden erasure. Progress came from stability, the voice said. From time to time. From not being reset to ash every few generations. The projection faded. We are not ending conflict, the voice concluded. We are preventing extinction-level mistakes. The council absorbed that in silence. At last, a delegate from a newly spacefaring species, one that had only recently joined the galactic community, spoke with trembling resolve. What are we to you? They asked. Subjects? Children? Experiments. The human answer came gently. Neighbors, the voice said, and fellow survivors. The shadows around the chamber dimmed further, no longer oppressive, more like distant clouds. We will not rule you, the voice continued. We will not tax you. We will not dictate your culture or beliefs. A pause. But we will intervene if your actions threaten the structure that allows all of us to exist. That was the line. Not domination. Not benevolence. A boundary drawn across the galaxy itself. The council took its first formal vote since humanity's return. It was not a declaration of allegiance. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition that the era of unchecked power projection had ended. The motion passed, not unanimously, but decisively. The human presence did not celebrate. Instead, the shadows began to thin, dispersing once more into the dark matter sea that hid them so completely. Before they vanished, the human voice spoke one final time in the session. Fear will not disappear overnight, it said. You will resent us. You will test us. You may even hate us. A pause. That is acceptable. The darkness receded further. What is not acceptable, the voice finished, is burning the future because the past taught you to. The chamber lights returned to normal. The artificial star shone bright and steady. The council sat alone again. But the galaxy they governed was no longer the same. Because fear had learned a new name. And that name was not humanity. It was a consequence. The galaxy adjusted. Slowly at first. Unevenly. Painfully. For many civilizations, peace felt unnatural. Trade convoys traveled without escorts. Border patrols stood down. Generals found themselves staring at star maps that no longer mattered the way they once had. For others, peace felt like freedom. Worlds that had lived under threat for generations began to rebuild openly. Children grew up without learning evacuation drills as their first lesson. Scientists worked without military oversight. Artists created without wondering if their cities would exist long enough to finish their work. And through it all, humanity remained unseen. The shadows still existed. Everyone knew that. Sensors confirmed dark matter stabilization nodes across critical regions of space. Jump corridors were subtly shaped, strengthened, guided. But there were no messages. No patrols. No commands. That silence became unsettling. Because silence always invites temptation. It came from the fringe. A coalition of systems far from the Council's reach. Worlds rich in resources, poor in unity. They had watched events unfold with suspicion, not awe. To them, humanity was not a guardian. Humanity was a bottleneck. They called themselves the Ascendant Compact. Their ideology was simple. The galaxy belonged to those willing to take it. Humanity's boundaries were an insult to evolution itself. Survival, they believed, required dominance or extinction. They did not believe humanity could truly see everything. They were wrong. The Compact did not attack human assets. They were not foolish. Instead, they targeted something subtler. Time. They began experimenting with causality weapons, devices designed to fracture local timelines, creating isolated loops where actions could be hidden from broader observation. The technology was unstable, outlawed even before humanity's return. That was the point. If they could act between moments, they could rebuild unchecked power without triggering humanity's limits. The first test erased a minor system. Not destroyed, displaced. The star flickered out of history, its planets never having formed. Records rewrote themselves automatically. To most of the galaxy, that system had never existed. To humanity, it screamed. For the first time since their return, the shadows moved aggressively. Not everywhere. Just once. A single human vessel emerged near the compact's hidden research nexus. It did not appear as a shadow this time. It appeared as a shape. Clear. Defined. Terrifyingly simple. The compact's sensors detected it instantly and failed to understand it at all. The ship was small compared to war fleets. No visible weapons. No energy buildup. They fired anyway. The weapons vanished before reaching it. The human vessel did not retaliate. Instead, a transmission activated, direct, unfiltered, impossible to block. "This is the line," the human voice said. The compact leaders scoffed. They demanded proof. Threatened retaliation. Boasts of technologies humanity could not track. The human ship moved closer. Reality around it began to thin. The compact's causality experiments destabilized. Timelines they had fractured began snapping back together violently. Labs phased in and out of existence. Scientists aged decades and seconds, or reversed, screaming as memory and matter fell out of alignment. The human voice spoke again. "You were warned," it said. "The boundary is not territorial." The compact finally understood too late. This boundary is existential. The human vessel extended something that was not a weapon. It was a decision. A region of space surrounding the compact's core systems was isolated, not by walls, not by force fields, but by probability itself. Events inside became increasingly unlikely to affect the outside universe. Ships could leave. Messages could be sent. But nothing they did would ever matter beyond their own borders again. They were not imprisoned. They were irrelevant. The human voice delivered the final judgment. "You will not be erased," it said. "You will be remembered as an example." The vessel vanished. No explosion followed. No aftermath visible from afar. Just a sudden, permanent quiet around the compact's territory, a dead zone of consequence where ambition could no longer spread. The shockwave was not physical. It was philosophical. Across the galaxy, every civilization understood what had just happened. Humanity had crossed a line they had promised never to cross. And in doing so, they proved something far more frightening than power. They proved restraint had limits. The Galactic Council reconvened in an emergency session, not in panic, but in awe. A delegate asked the question no one had wanted answered. "Is that our fate if we defy you?" The human response came, steady and unmistakable. "No," the voice said. "That is the fate of those who threaten existence itself." A pause. "You are free to hate us," the voice continued. "Free to resent us. Free to seek your own path." Another pause, heavier. "You are not free to gamble with the universe." Silence followed. The council did not protest. They did not argue. Because the message was no longer abstract. Humanity had not become tyrants. They had become custodians of the final threshold, the point beyond which experimentation, ambition, and war ceased to be tolerable risks. The shadows withdrew once more. But this time, they left something behind. A marker, not a structure, not a beacon, a rule embedded into space-time itself. Across the galaxy, certain actions now failed before they could begin. Technologies refused to function. Equations stopped converging. Experiments reached dead ends with no explanation. The universe itself had been edited. Humanity had written a clause into reality, and everyone could feel it. As the council adjourned, one final realization settled over them all. Humanity was no longer reacting to threats. They were shaping what threats could exist. And that meant the galaxy was no longer a place of infinite possibility. It was a place of guarded survival. The stars still shone. But now, somewhere between them, an unseen line waited. Unmarked, unmoving, unforgiving. And no one who crossed it would ever matter again. Long after the ascendant compact fell into irrelevance, the galaxy entered an age without a name. Historians tried to define it. Some called it the era of balance. Others called it the age of silence. A few, more honest than most, called it the time of being watched. None of them were fully wrong. Wars did not vanish completely. Conflict still existed, on worlds, between factions, within species themselves. Disputes flared. Borders shifted slightly. Pride still caused suffering. But something fundamental had changed. No war grew too large. No weapon grew too reckless. No ambition grew blind enough to threaten everything. Because every civilization now understood the same truth. There was a ceiling, and above it, humanity waited. The Galactic Council continued to meet, though its purpose slowly transformed. Once a theater of power, it became a place of caution. Debates were quieter. Decisions took longer. Proposals were weighed not just for advantage, but for consequence. Every major initiative carried a new, unspoken question. Would this draw their attention? Most never did. Humanity did not interfere with trade disputes. They did not intervene in planetary conflicts or cultural revolutions. Entire empires rose and fell within the boundaries of what was now allowed. The shadows never moved. That terrified some more than any show of force ever could. On distant worlds, children were taught a new kind of history. Not a list of wars and heroes, but warnings. They learned about the collapse that never happened. The war that was stopped without a battle. The species that refused the throne. Humanity became a story told in careful tones. Not gods. Not demons. Caretakers. But caretakers were not always kind. Deep in the void, far beyond the edges of mapped space, the truth was far stranger than any myth. Humanity has not returned to rest. They had returned to prepare. Within regions where even dark matter grew dense and tangled, human structures continued to evolve. Vast, distributed intelligences processed reality itself, monitoring stress across spacetime like physicians reading vital signs. Galactic collisions were predicted centuries in advance. Star formation rates were adjusted subtly. Black holes were nudged, ever so slightly, to prevent catastrophic resonance events. No one saw this. No one was meant to. Because humanity had learned the most dangerous lesson of all. Power did not need to be seen to be absolute. Within these hidden regions, humanity faced debates far more severe than anything the Council could imagine. They argued about limits. How much intervention was too much? How much risk was acceptable? At what point did protection become control? Some humans believed they had already crossed that line. Others believed they had crossed it too late. They remembered what the galaxy did not. The centuries of hunger. The abandoned colonies. The quiet deaths no one recorded. They remembered being told to stop. They remembered being ignored. And they remembered the moment they realized that survival, once achieved, carried obligation. Not domination. Obligation. One human voice, preserved in internal archives, summarized it simply. If we step away now, someone else will eventually break everything. Not out of evil, out of ignorance. That fear haunted them more than any enemy ever had. Then, one day, something changed. At the edge of the observable universe, beyond the great filaments humanity monitored so carefully, a signal appeared. It was not a message. It was a pattern. Dark matter fluctuations that did not match natural models. Gravitational echoes repeating with deliberate intervals. Structures forming where none should exist. Human systems detected it instantly. And for the first time in centuries, uncertainty spread through the human network. This was not a galactic threat. It was extragalactic. Something vast was moving between galaxies. Something old. Something that did not use stars, planets, or fleets. Something that fed on structure itself. Humanity understood immediately. Everything they had built, the boundaries, the limits, the enforced restraint, had been preparation. Not for the galaxy. For what came after. They did not alert the Council. There was no need. Panic would serve no purpose. Instead, humanity quietly adjusted. Dark matter nodes shifted into deeper configurations. Defensive constructs aligned not around worlds, but around galactic frameworks. The shadows became denser, more numerous, spreading beyond familiar regions. Across the galaxy, sensitive instruments recorded subtle changes. Stars brightened or dimmed slightly. Background radiation patterns shifted. Time dilation maps updated without explanation. Scientists noticed. They did not understand. But they trusted me. Because humanity had earned that trust the hard way. In the council chamber, a junior delegate, born long after humanity's return, asked an innocent question. Do you think they will ever leave? An elder replied after a long pause. No, they said. I think they will stay until staying is no longer enough. Far beyond the Council's reach, the first true test of humanity's guardianship approached. The extragalactic presence pressed closer, bending space in ways even human models struggled to predict. It was not hostile in any way humanity recognized. It was simply incompatible. If it passed through the galaxy, stars would unravel. Dark matter filaments would collapse. Entire civilizations would vanish without ever knowing why. Humanity did not hesitate. They had made their choice centuries ago. The fleet, if it could still be called that, moved as one. Not in attack formation. In containment. Humanity did not plan to destroy what was coming. They planned to divert it. To shield the galaxy behind layers of engineered absence, guiding the thread along paths that would lead it away from inhabited reality. It would take centuries. It would cost resources no other species could imagine. It would require humanity to remain vigilant long after the galaxy forgot why they were there. And humanity accepted that without debate. Because this was who they had become. Not conquerors. Not rulers. Not saviors seeking praise. Watchers. Guardians of a fragile structure no one else had noticed until it nearly broke. As the first dark matter tides met the approaching anomaly, human systems synchronized, their silent engines humming with purpose. No one in the galaxy saw the battle that followed. There were no explosions. No collapsing stars. No heroic last stands. Only careful adjustments. Endless calculation. Patience measured in centuries. And it worked. The anomaly shifted course, sliding past the galaxy like a tide redirected by unseen shores. The stars endured. Life continued. No celebrations followed. No monuments were built. Humanity returned to silence. Back in the council chamber, the artificial star glowed softly as delegates concluded another uneventful session. Trade agreements were signed. Disputes mediated. History continued, ordinary and fragile. Above them all, unseen and unacknowledged, humanity watched from the dark. Not because they desired control, but because they remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. And they would never allow the galaxy to learn that lesson the hard way again. If the stars ever went dark, it would not be because humanity failed. It would be because something even they could not stop had finally arrived. Until that day, the galaxy would live. Quietly. Safely. Under the shadow of those who turned silence into strength.